We wanted to make sure if we were shut down for 60 days by the US government, we could pay our employees, right, our associates.
Yes.
And in fact, the DOT invented the rankings of the airlines because Continental was so bad. That's a true story.
Sort of indirect command there that we've got to be first. First or last, as the famous Ricky Bobby said.
What's the saying? If you owe a little, the bank owns you. If you owe a lot, you own the bank.
That's right.
We actually owned the bank. We were in pretty bad shape. It's really what tithing is. It's really fasting from money so it doesn't become a controller. It can be a wonderful servant or a relentless master.
I'm Rick Walker. I'm sitting down with some of my most captivating friends to discuss topics ranging from politics and business to religion and pop culture. Welcome to Conversations at the Mansion. Greg Brenneman, welcome to the Mansion.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Rick. It's nice to be here with you today.
Great to have you. Great to have you. Well, let's jump right into business. I want to get a little bit of your background. You started off education-wise, I guess after undergrad school at Harvard, and then you ended up at Bain as your first consulting gig. But so could you kind of walk us through that process, that time of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I grew up in a small Kansas farm town. So in a Mennonite farm town, I grew up Mennonite, so I have some Amish relatives, and learned how to work really hard and to treat people with dignity and respect there. And then I actually left to go to school in the big city of Topeka, Kansas, and went to Washburn University. So I actually am kind of rolling with no real mascots. So the first mascot at Heston, where I was, it was a farm town, and there was a big company there that made swathers, hay swathers.
Okay.
And so we were the Heston Swathers. So our mascot was a piece of farm equipment. And then I went to Washburn, and we were the Washburn Ichabods after Ichabod Washburn. So our mascot was this man with this tall hat. So I'm still looking to get to a place with a good mascot. But I went to those, and then after that, I went and got my CPA. I had my CPA coming out of undergrad.
Okay.
And went and worked at an accounting firm called Arthur Andersen, which is kind of doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
It's been kind of merged and combined. It used to be the Big Eight, and now it's the Big Four. And after that, went back to Harvard Business School, got my MBA, and went to work at Bain many years ago when Mitt Romney was running the firm. So got to spend some time with Mitt, and others doing that. Became a partner at Bain. And about 2 years into my tenure at Bain, three of us left Boston and opened Bain's Dallas office.
Okay.
And so that's
a big office now.
That's a really big office. Yeah, we went from three of us to 120 in like 3 years. So it was really fast growing. It's a big office. It's now Dallas and Houston. So they've come to Houston as well. And my son ended up working there for about 10 years, many years after I did. He just left last year. And I was doing turnarounds at Bain, so taking companies that were really broken and kind of was leading Bain's turnaround practice. And one of my clients was Continental Airlines when it was in just terrible shape. It was a 10th place airline. It was 10th out of 10 in on-time performance, 10th out of 10 in baggage handling. Had 10th out of 10 in customer complaints, had 10 presidents in 10 years.
Wow.
And was working to help turn that around.
These days at Continental, you can see the changes. Something new here. A renewed sense of pride there. The fact is, we've been listening to you. And it's showing. In the way we look, the way we act, and especially in the way we serve you.
And then David Bonderman, who owned Continental at the time, it was the only deal he had out of the Bass, had left the Bass brothers to do it, called and asked me if I would be president of Continental. And so at 32, I took a leave of absence from Bain initially and then formally left to become president of Continental Airlines. So that's kind of my, a quick stair step into how I started doing crazy things like turning around companies and having some fun doing that.
Yeah. So funny thing, we interviewed Senator Mike Lee last week, and we're going to release his video in the next 24 hours as well. You mentioned Mitt Romney. So I'm trying to convince Senator Lee to pull rank with Mitt Romney. Of course, Senator Lee, who's 25 years younger than Mitt Romney, is the senior senator of Utah, and Mitt Romney is the junior senator.
Yeah.
And he refuses to pull rank. He said, I think he said Mitt likes to make the joke that anytime he can have the word junior in his title, he'll take that.
No, that's good. They're a pretty good combination because I think they bring a couple different perspectives to the state, and both incredible senators. So.
Definitely. You sort of wonder what direction the state's trending. They're opposite ends of the conservative spectrum.
No, they very much are. Yeah, no, they truly are. But yeah, I respect both of those guys. They're both incredible individuals.
So growing up in Kansas, did you have that influence that's there right now with the Koch brothers? Were they really big back then, or was that?
Yeah, no. So where I grew up in Heston was about 20 minutes from where where Wichita is, where the Kochs are. And they've certainly were influential and have become more influential. But it was a real town of entrepreneurs, that whole area. So my great uncle Lyle Yost, who was my first mentor, he gave me my first job in the 3rd grade. He actually, if you ask him what his mission in life was, he would say it was to mechanize things for farmers.
Wow.
And so when he was a kid, he used to, when they baled hay, he used to have to take loose hay with a pitchfork and throw it on the back of a wagon. And he invented the first hay baler. And then he invented the machines that make the big round bales and the big square bales, you see. And he turned that into a Fortune 500 company in Heston. And he also taught himself how to fly, so he was a pilot. And if you ask him what his purpose in life, what God called him to do, he'd tell you it was to give away all his money before he died.
Wow.
And so he developed this missional approach of faith at work, and he thought if you create jobs for people, you'd earn the ability to speak into their lives. And so he started what's still the largest dairy in Latin America, completely as an exercise to create jobs. For people that didn't. He built the Aspen Chapel in Aspen, Colorado. If you go to Aspen, there's a chapel in the middle of town. And it's dedicated to my grandfather and to my great uncle, both of who were preachers. And so just an amazing individual. But Uncle Lyle was pretty good friends with Fred Koch, who started Koch, but also with the Gates brothers from Gates Learjet and the Cessna brothers. And then later, a little bit later on, Frank Carney started Pizza Hut in Wichita. So it was this kind of pod of entrepreneurs, and just a ton of businesses kind of spawned out of that group of entrepreneurial individuals. But my great uncle was very much a part of that, and just an amazing human being.
Sure. And of course, when I think Fred Koch died, Charles Koch took over from.
Charles took over from Fred, and I still stay in touch with the Koch family. I saw Charles maybe 3 months ago. Went to Wichita and spent some time with him, and his senior management team. A lot of the folks, they're incredible individuals and human beings. Many of them I went to high school with. So our high school graduating class was 61 as the Heston Swathers, and of his top 5 guys, a couple are from my high school graduating class, and from that era, right around when I graduated, and then a couple more, went to places like Emporia State and have done just amazing things. But it's a group of really homegrown individuals that Charles has mentored over a long period of time.
Sure. And it seems like there's a direct correlation between his strategy and your strategy, because he's known as being the CEO mentor. When he rolled these businesses, the Georgia Pacific guys, they'd bring in their MBM philosophies and they would roll it out. And I remember, and I do want to talk about your Sunday morning small group. I know Kyle Van is part of that, who used to be CEO of Koch Energy.
Yeah.
And it was also, I think he was mentored a little bit by Charles Koch.
Yeah, Charles, he was really Charles' right-hand man for many, many years before he ended up at Koch Energy, as well. And so Kyle and I went back together. And it's like a homecoming for Kyle for sure to see Charles and the team.
So Kyle and I were having breakfast one morning, and Kyle's been mentoring me for a while, probably over the last 12 years, something like that. And he tells me the story where he walks into Charles Koch's office, and I guess he shows up once a month for this sort of leadership meeting with Charles. And Charles handed him the book. It was Ludwig von Mises's Human Action Books, which is 1,200 pages, if someone's not familiar with that. It's a 1,200-page book. And he said, well, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I think is what he said. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
And so he had, he's running these businesses. I think he's training other CEOs as well. But he's also has his homework assignment to read this 1,200-page book on Austrian economics.
Yeah, no, Charles is a big thinker, right?
Yeah.
He very much is, and Austrian economics has
That's right.
been his passion, I think, for a very long time. And he's been very philanthropic as well. Sometimes when you get into the press, you never know how people are going to spin things. But he and his brothers have done a lot of good in the world as well with their philanthropy. But he's a libertarian for sure.
Yes. Well, Greg, I want to give you a gift, just to thank you before we get started here. So, one of the elements of the show is fashion and design, and so I try to give everyone a little bit of a gift that they wouldn't expect.
That's why you're so dapper. Yeah. There you go.
So this is for you.
Thank you.
And so we always give a couple of rules with the gift.
Yeah.
So these are only to be worn with jeans
Okay.
or joggers.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you want to take it out.
Can I open these up and take a look?
And I texted Andrew for your shoe size.
Oh, fantastic. Look at those. Yeah, I would say probably not with suits, but they actually look like they could make it work. Well, thank you very much.
Yes. You're
I'll
welcome.
enjoy these.
You're welcome.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. And so the
Those are
politicians,
nice.
you got to stay under $20 or whatever the federal limit is. But yeah.
I appreciate that.
So one of the funny things is when I sort your YouTube history by most views, I think the number one, the top watched video was an interview you did at UK Society with Bill and Cody Nath.
Uh-huh.
So Cody Nath,
Okay.
I have breakfast with Cody once a month.
Oh,
he was
good.
actually over here 48 hours ago, and I mentioned that you were coming in. He kind of got kicked out of that. But Bill Nath and then Kyle Van and I think Hal Chappelle and you have the Sunday morning meeting. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, when I was about 45, which was, I hate to say it, like 14, 15 years ago now, I had come back from having, worked with great teams to do the turnaround at Continental and then PwC Consulting and then BurgerKing and all very successful. But I felt like, going back to the example of my uncle Lyle and his dual mission of being successful in business and creating jobs, but also translating that, to helping others. I'd felt like the church in Laodicea, you're neither hot nor cold, but you're lukewarm, so I'm going to spit you out, Jesus says in Revelation. And so I thought, I really need to actually, if I've been writing these one-page plans to turn around businesses, I need to see if I can write a one-page plan to turn around me. So I actually pulled out a sheet of paper and just put what we call the 5 F's, faith, family, friends, fitness, finance, and thought I'll list 2 or 3 things under each of those that are blue chips, essentially, are the things you want to accomplish in life that won't necessarily make your daily to-do list, right? And so the first of those, under faith, I want to become an intimate of God's, right? A.W. Tozer, is a theologian, has a statement, God doesn't have favorites, but he does have intimates. And so I was thinking, what are the few things I could write down there to sort of that would really make a long-term difference? And the normal things are true. What do you read? What do you study? Are you spending time in the Bible? You're spending time in prayer. But one of the things I thought that would be beneficial to me, which guys are terrible at, and me too, are terrible at, is actually developing a close group of friends that were CEOs, could relate to the problems that you kind of face running companies or working in the business world. But we're also very strong believers and had good faith. So out of that actually came a small group. We call it after Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron. Yeah. And we've been meeting for 14, 15 years now. And so it's Bill, Kyle, and Hal, as you mentioned, and myself. And we meet usually Sunday mornings before church. Actually, as COVID hit, and we actually met a lot longer because we weren't kind of rushing to get done. But we start at usually 6:30 or so in the morning and go till like 8:30, so a couple hours. And we either read something, or right now we're going through Tozer's, Knowledge of the Holy book.
Yeah.
It's a great book. But we listen to a lot of Tim Keller sermons. We've done a number of different things, and we'll talk about it, and then we'll just share life.
Yeah.
Do some scripture memory, but share life together. And we've been doing that now for probably 40 weeks a month. I mean, with people on vacation and stuff, we miss occasionally, but for 14, 15 years. And that's been a life changer. And anybody that, whatever your age is, I wish I would not have waited till I was 45. But if I can look back and say, if you could start that in your 20s, be pretty cool, right? You know, to have that kind of close group of friends. So,
Sure.
So those guys are fantastic.
Yeah. So you mentioned Tozer. I think in that book is where he drops the line, it's not what you do that makes a man holy, it's why you do it.
Yeah, no, he's got a lot of great lines in that. You know, that's another one that says what you think about God says more about you than it does about God.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
So it's a pretty impressive book.
Yeah. So I guess now would be a good time to just to jump straight into the book as well.
Yeah.
So you've got the book that centers around this 5-step go forward plan, this turnaround plan, and you break the book up into alternating chapters: business or organizational turnaround and personal turnaround. Would you walk us through the 5 steps and why you chose those?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I really didn't set my goal out to ever write a book. I had after we'd done the turnaround to Continental, which was written up quite a bit in the press and the journal and in the
Harvard Business Review,
business
case study,
periodicals. Yeah. And I got a call from Susie Wetlaufer, who was actually now Susie Welsh, ended up being Jack Welch's wife.
Wow.
But Susie and I went to business school together, and we were in the same year. And then we sat next to each other at Bain. So we both went to Bain and Company together.
Wow.
And so she was editor of the Harvard Business Review, and I was president of Continental. And she said, Greg, we have to write about, how you guys did this, because, I've been following it. I've been, reading the press, and it would be a great Harvard Business Review article. And I said, no, Susie, we really don't. And she kept bugging me, and finally she said, well, could you just send me something and I'll play with it? And she was, most people don't know this, she was a romance novelist before she came to Harvard. So she was an incredible writer, different genre. So I sent in what I thought was like pretty pathetic. I spent a few hours jotting a few things down and sent it to her. And she sent back this just amazing article that she had edited, right? Edited, I put in loose quotes. She had done a great job with it, called Right Away and All at Once, How We Saved Continental Airlines. And so that was out there, and it became an HBS bestseller as people were thinking about, in their own cases, how to either turn their companies around, or if their company was what I call satisfactorily underperforming, which I stole from my early days at Bain. That was a Bain term. And could get better, they were also applying it to that. And the way we actually turned around Continental was really a 5-step process, part of which had been developed when I was working at Bain doing turnarounds, essentially, and doing it. And the first step of that was write a 1-page plan. So have a plan and track your progress. And so for every business I look at, I pull out a sheet of paper and I write market, financial, product, and people, right? And then under each of those categories, just 4 or 5 things that are the main value drivers that will really, transform a business, either, tune it up or completely turn it around. And so the airline is a great example. We tried to come up with catchy phrases for each of those. So the market plan was fly to win.
Sure.
The first bullet under that was stop flying places people don't want to go. So I could go on, and then we fund the future was the financial piece, because we said if we don't have some funds, we're not going to have a future. We're almost bankrupt.
That's right.
And then make reliability reality, was the product plan, and we are so terrible. We were the 10th place rated airline, for years and years. And in fact, the DOT invented the rankings of the airlines because Continental was so bad. That's a true story. So we flipped that and said we need to actually get people to their destination on time with their underwear, serve them good food when they're hungry, show them movies when they're bored, and do that 2,500 times a day. And then the last piece was the most important, called working together, which was the people plan. So having that plan, 4 or 5 things under each of those 4 categories, no more than that, metriced so you could tell where you were, and rallying 55,000 people around it. Really worked. The stock went from 6 to 120, and we, for 6 years in a row, were the best airline in America as measured by J.D. Power, and we went to first in the on-time performance, and became number 18 on the 100 best places to work in America. So, it was kind of magical. That was the kind of first piece. The second piece is build a fortress balance sheet. So it's essentially make sure you don't run out of cash and your debt, matches your maturities. You know that from the real estate business. some sort of basic things, but things people forget, as they're doing businesses. The third one was think money in, not money out. We said you can make a pizza so cheap nobody wants to eat it. You can make an airline so bad the service level nobody wants to fly it, and that's true of about anything. So that's kind of the third point is how do you generate revenue, not just reduce expenses.
Sure.
And then the fourth one was build a team, clean house if necessary. So you need to take your plan. Don't look at who you have on your team, but draw the team that is needed to fit your plan, the org structure, and then figure out who you really need to execute it. Some of those people you may have, but some you may not. And you need to treat people with dignity and respect if you need to move them along down the highway of life. But you need to do that to be successful in any business. And then the last piece was let the inmates run the asylum, which probably in today's words would be better expressed as, make sure once you have your plan, got your fortress balance sheet, you've thought about how to generate revenue, you've got a really good management team that can work with people and are people that can motivate people, then just empower the employees to do it. Sure. And that's the 5 steps. Simple and easy are not the same thing. That sounds simple, but it's often hard to do.
Sure. So before you're making an offer on acquiring a business, I imagine step one, you've already identified some of the KPIs that are needed, some of these key levers that are, if we change these 3 to 5 things or 3 to 15 things, that we would turn the business around.
Yeah, no, in fact, as I was looking at whether I was going to take a CEO job or not, I would actually pull out a sheet of paper, and if I couldn't write the plan, it didn't have to be perfect because you need to check it with, your management team and other people that know the business better. But if I couldn't have a good idea of what to do, I didn't take the job, essentially.
Yeah.
And the same is true for buying businesses. If we can't sit down and actually pull out that, what are the, we're going to, in private equity where I am now, we're going to own the business for 5 to 7 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. What are the things we can really accomplish in that time to grow the business? I really do believe God put us on this earth as business people to create jobs. And grow things. And what are those things, those key levers? And there can't be 50 pages and it can't be a tomb. It'll never get read, it'll never get done. But what are those really key things that need to get done?
And it takes more time and more thought to do a 1-page plan than to do a 100-page plan.
It really does. In fact, this gets attributed to a lot of people, this statement I'm about to make, Mark Twain most famously. But it really, if you go back, and I traced it back to Blaise Pascal in the 1400s, who said, I would have written you a short letter, but I didn't have enough time, so I wrote a long one. And if you really want to ever stump your management team, ask them to sit and agree and spend the time to write a plan that's on 1 page that has no more than 4 bullets under each of those categories or 5, that's in like 16 font, not 2 font, right? Where you need a magnifying glass. And you'll have a really great discussion because it's hard to do.
It is.
But when you do it, it's so powerful because then you can roll it out and communicate it to everybody.
Yeah. Build a fortress balance sheet. I think at Continental you went to the capital markets and there was some attractive bond pricing at the time, bond rates at the time. I think you used debt as a...
Well, we actually inherited something a little bit different than that. So I should credit Jamie Dimon, my friend, with the fortress balance sheet idea. He was really a pro at that during the financial crisis. I went in to see him and he explained to me why he was still standing. He had really focused on his balance sheet. So the term comes from him. But the idea at Continental when we got in there, I discovered, maybe I was there 3 weeks as a president, and it was Thanksgiving Day and I was going through the cash flow statements and I discovered we were going to run out of cash in January. On payroll, January 17th was payroll. We were going to run out of cash then. And it would have been Continental's 3rd bankruptcy and probably wouldn't have survived that. They had 2 before we got there. And so I called the board and my partner, Gordon Bethune, is an incredible manager, and said, hey, we got 2 choices. We can either negotiate with the creditors. There are like 8 or 10 that matter, GE, Boeing, Airbus, Rolls-Royce on engines. You can imagine who they were. Or declare bankruptcy for the 3rd time, and nobody's really ever survived that. And so the next Monday after Thanksgiving, I found myself with the creditors in a room, and I said, hey, here's the deal. Here's our go-forward plan. our one-page plan and what we're going to do to kind of try and fix the airline. Here's our financial situation, right, in terms of our cash flow. And here's what we want from you, which was basically not to make principal and interest payments anytime in the near future. And they all started yelling at me. And so I got up to leave the room, and they said, Greg, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go home and watch TV. And they said, what do you mean you're going to go home and watch TV? And I said, well, do you know what the first step in problem solving is? And they look at me kind of funny. I said, it's who's got the problem. I said, this whole company's worth $175 million. You guys are in the hawk. You're owed $12 billion. You fix it. And they came and got me, 20 or 30 minutes later, and we worked something out. And they were all paid off about 18 months later. Wow. That's just how fast it turned. So we ultimately were able to access the financial markets after the turnaround started happening, and we became profitable, but not right away. Yeah. we had a few things to do before that.
Sure.
What's the saying? If you owe a little, the bank owns you. If you owe a lot, you own the bank.
That's right.
We actually owned the bank. We were in pretty bad shape.
Yeah. I think it was Jamie Dimon that in the last 48 hours they released their statements. He made a statement that he believes consumer accounts have $2 trillion in additional deposits right now, and they've seen a 26% decline in consumer debt on their balance sheet in the last
well,
few months.
I don't know what the end implications of all that's going to be, but you don't have to wonder why that is, right? I mean, what did we do? $2 trillion of stimulus last spring in 20.
Yes.
We did another, I want to say, 600 or 800 billion in December, right?
Yes.
And we just did another 1.9 trillion. It's hard to even say those numbers. That's like 1 year's federal discretionary budget each time you say that number. And so we have piled on the debt, and we sent it to the consumer. So I think the consumer is super healthy, and demand is roaring. I mean, the economy is roaring. But, I really don't know that we needed that last stimulus, to be honest. I mean, we needed targeted stimulus for people who had been hit by COVID, were out of work, or people that were needing it. But I think we should be roughly done, I hope, with this helicoptering of money. But that's kind of why the consumer balance sheet is where it is. It's really been given to them by the federal government.
That's right. There's this dichotomy because people that I think we both probably know, the PPP first round comes up, and they apply and they get $5 million to $10 million. I have a friend that got $10 million here in town, and which I think is the maximum amount. And so it's run entirely by a family office, a separate entity, but the operating business needed the $10 million to stay afloat, which they would have invested, obviously, to keep the business afloat. But they said, Rick, we have to take the money because we're going to be inflated out of our current assets.
Yeah.
And I think they were right.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, at time will tell, but I do think we need to kind of come back and just do I think we're getting to the back end of COVID with all the vaccines happening, and we'll have to sort of mind our financial house just a little bit here to go forward. But,
That's right. Management teams.
Yeah.
Every time, just assuming that we're going to take over a business, it's a turnaround project. The management team there is probably responsible why it needs to be turned around. Is that typically a management team that needs to be replaced?
It kind of depends on the situation. So I think, again, if you take your plan out and you say, okay, now what's the perfect team to execute the plan, not what do I have? In a really, really good company, right? I'm lead director at the Home Depot. It's a really good company.
Yes.
If you do that, you probably have 5 or 10%. You're always moving people around to get them into the best position, to give them experiences and stuff. That's more kind of normal management. But if you're in a company that's really broken, like we were at Continental, or BurgerKing was in the same kind of state, that's really, and you can think of other examples, IBM under Lou Gerstner, or Chrysler under Lee Iacocca way back when, but there's lots of examples. It's pretty hard for that sled dog that took you in the ditch to pull you back out, right? You need some new talent. At Continental, we had 60 officers when we arrived. we actually did a basic test of, I just state these in funny ways, so don't take offense to them, but I do what I call an IQ dipstick test. Like, you remember you used to check the oil in your car with the dipstick?
Yeah.
If it comes out 2 quarts empty, probably not going to work. You need to help that person find a different role.
Sure.
And then a fly across the Atlantic test, which is this a person you want to sit next to flying 8 hours in a plane? Is it somebody you can work with? Is it somebody, that works well with others? Because working together is such an important part of business. And so we went through the management team in that sense, and we actually ended up replacing about 50 of the 60 with 20 folks that were really could optimize on all those, both those dimensions. Both they're really bright at what they did and very talented, and but also were great working with other people and treated other people with dignity and respect. And did the same thing in many other businesses, BurgerKing and many of the businesses we own at CCMP, we apply the same process to.
Yes.
You hope in a really well-run business, you're just adding a person or two, or you're just, basically augmenting the skill set, and that happens many times. In one that's really pretty broken, or that needs a totally different skill set, that becomes more intensive in terms of that. So it's not always you have to replace everybody, but sometimes you do.
Before we started rolling, we had a conversation about Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is a real big IQ proponent. He and Nicholas Nassim Taleb get in a big argument on Twitter every once in a while about whether IQ is a good thing to measure people by or not.
Why do we even have to debate this? And because it's so bloody obvious to me that intelligence is a major predictor of life success. I mean, you people, I've measured the IQ of University of Toronto people. People in this room who have an IQ of less than 120 are rare. Well, why? Well, smart people go to university. Now, is that actually a contentious statement? Well, it shouldn't be a contentious statement. It's self-evident. Universities were actually set up so that smart people could expand their abilities. That's why they were there. And you're selected on the basis of assessments that are essentially there to assess something like intelligence.
And I think it's illegal. I think it's discriminatory in the United States to use IQ pre-selection, but I think you can use cognitive assessments. Yeah. And so we started using a tool that's assessing the cognitive performance of people. And so we stopped hiring people that are not in the top 30 percentile.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Cognitive performance, because they learn faster, they're smarter, they're better problem solvers, and you don't spend as much time training them.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm sure you can apply a lot of theory and to that. We were much more organic in our approach. We just said. We actually looked at the people who were talented in the organization and said, who do you know? Yeah. Right, who do you know that's really good? If we needed, say, a pricing person at Continental, or we needed somebody in ops at BurgerKing, we did the kind of, who do you know that you'd want to work with that you think is excellent? And we often ended up getting folks that were number 2 or 3 in the positional lineup at a competitor, or, but, we're probably smarter than their boss. And it's not a bad. I still do that a lot. It's not a bad way to hire people.
Yeah, I get my cognitive assessments back from my management team, and I realize I'm the stupid one here.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd be scared, honestly, Rick, to take one of those tests. I might not pass.
Don't share with anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, for sure.
So you've got these different elements when you're looking at placing a team member in a leadership position. You've got obviously cognitive capacity, the dipstick text. You've got resume. You've got integrity. You've got some other variables there, relevant workforce, education, things like that. What are maybe the 2 or 3 things that you put most emphasis on that they've got to be these 2 or 3 things before they even get out of the gate?
Well, I think just the demonstrated ability to work with other people successfully, somebody you'd really want to, be in the trenches with. So that's just so fundamentally important, because life's way too short to, quite honestly, work with jerks. And then I also kind of put a lot of emphasis and thought into diversity, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, but just diversity of thought and idea and experience. So you're looking to develop a pretty well-rounded team. And then obviously just a capability, right? I mean, just, what have they done? Have they done it before? Do they have the ability to do it? So I'd say probably those 3. Yeah. I'm sort of constantly thinking about.
So in your book, there's an underlying tone, a bias towards action. Yeah. There is a general tone of focusing on money in versus money out, which is more of an aggressive stance for business. A lot of business guys are operators. They want to cut the OPEX, but they don't want to focus on marketing and sales. But I mean, you're a big proponent for sales, marketing. It seems like you've got this kind of aura of being aggressive and being out there in advancement and action.
Yeah, it's a good point. I like to say I'd rather somebody make 20 decisions a day and get 2 of them wrong and fix those than take 2 months to make a decision. So there's a clear bias of action. If you're turning something around that's really broken, you don't have any choice. I mean, you got to go fast, right? Yeah. But the companies that are satisfactorily underperforming, that are doing fine but not hitting their full potential, those are the ones where you kind of have to push a little bit more on the on the organic growth. I'll tell you, I admire Craig Menear, who's the CEO of HomeDepot and a dear friend of mine. He's just constantly pushing, as was Frank Blake before him. What can we do better? How can we think about this better? How do we go from just bricks and mortar to true interconnected retail? Yes. The stock price, like every day now, hits a all-time high. So you can kind of see the results of that. It's fun to watch. We love buying businesses that actually are what I call fantastic industrial businesses, but that you can actually take and transform from a market perspective, like digitally transform them. Using new technology. And a couple good examples of that, Generac, the home standby generator company, has a fantastic CEO, Aaron Yodfeld. We owned that company for a long time, and it was an incredible manufacturing engineering company, but almost had a little bit of the philosophy way back when, this hasn't been true for years now, of, this would be a great business if it wasn't for the customer, right? They just so much love the technology and the manufacturing. We did a lot of things to kind of look forward, and Aaron put a little chip in the generator that before it could get turned on essentially by an electrician that was installing it, they'd have to register the address. So all of a sudden you knew where all the generators were being installed and you knew where to mark it, right? Simple things like that. We actually learned just in traveling around with the installers that the people that install generators are electricians, right? That work with high voltage electricity. And there's almost a direct correlation between people that work with high voltage electricity and introverts. They tend not to be, sales type people. So we developed an iPad app that when you went into a customer home, you could say, what do you want to come on? Do you want your refrigerator to come on, or you want your HVAC, half your house, your whole house when the power goes out? And that iPad app would lead you right to a sale and actually price it for you and everything. So it had videos in it. So with it, for an introvert, it's very hard to kind of sell. They had a tool that actually was very helpful to them. So you're trying to think of things like that. We actually own a pool equipment company now called Hayward, which is a leading supplier of pool equipment. If you're down here in Texas, you're probably short pool equipment after that ice storm because half the pumps and the heaters and stuff blew up. But we've done a lot of things to transform the company with variable speed pumps, high efficiency heaters, UV and ozone treatment to take out a lot of the chemicals. It has fast payback. But probably the coolest thing is these controls now, if I could pull out my cell phone and show you this, we had them rewrite an app for it. The app was terrible. I mean, you could hardly use it to sort of control your pool off your iPhone. And we brought it, this firm of 26-year-olds in to sort of redo it. It's now the #1 rated app on the App Store.
Wow.
And you can control your whole pool on the app, and there's 93% attachment of pool product, to the app. So if you have the app, you're putting in Hayward pool equipment. And so it's been a fantastic, I can't tell you how well the company's doing, but it's been a great company, but it was satisfactorily underperforming in terms of go-to-market.
Sure.
So new management, new CEO, new CFO, new head of North America, new management team, but also some tools that really helped to digitally transform the business. So those are a couple examples of how that works.
So I want to use digital transformation as a tool to get into this idea of speed.
Yeah.
I can just tell you in our internal business, we've got Zach that's watching off camera, who's one of our top leasing guys. We looked at about 2 years ago the transaction speed, making an investment in tying the CRM with the e-signing platform on our leasing side. Of course, you own commercial real estate. The top line is based off your revenue from leases. So the leases, if you speed up the lease process, you speed up your deal flow and your revenue accruement. Well, we decided that we're going to invest a significant amount of money in tying our CRM with our e-signing platform, just to take a few minutes off the lease preparation thing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So what we measured a couple of months ago was that when you send out one of these 20 or 30 page leases to these tenants, we were able to cut the average time to sign. So if they were going to sign a lease, they were signing it, I think it was in 3.5 minutes on average. So think about that. 30 pages, you're not reading 30 pages in 3 minutes, they're just signing it. We've had some crazy things happen via that e-signing platform. People are just signing on their phone. Just because you have the technology there, you make it easy, it's convenient, it's the natural thing to do. We've had multi-million dollars, hundreds of page contracts signed in less than 10 minutes before using the same sort of thing. And so little incremental improvements there really accrue to the top line and to the bottom line.
Huge. And in leases, that's perfect, right? I sit on a lot of boards, so I have a lot of board resolutions I need to sign. And if they send them to you in a PDF now, come into your iPhone, you can, of course, actually just hit on the PDF, you have your signature you've already left in there, hit your signature, move it up to your signature line, pop it in there and send it right back.
Wow.
Right, where it used to be, print this thing out, sign it, find a fax machine, or FedEx it back. I mean, you can now do it in a fraction of that time, and it's perfect for documents like that, right?
That's
leases are a perfect example.
That's right. And so we've got this bias towards action, which also has an implication towards speed.
Yeah.
Deal speed, transaction speed. You mentioned that you'd rather someone make 20 decisions and get a couple of them wrong than not make any decisions at all, because you really alluded to this feedback loop. And the quicker we can turn around this feedback loop, the more progress we make over time.
No, absolutely. And time is precious. And particularly if you're at a company and you're either growing it or turning it around, having people be able to fail fast.
Yes.
With some guardrails, right? You don't want people, betting the company on anything to do that. But fail fast, get the feedback, get better. Improve their decision making. It's critical to sort of optimizing a business.
That's right. I think John Maxwell wrote the book. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yeah.
And I mean that's really true.
You should always be making mistakes, right?
Yeah. That's right. And I think there's a lot of research that's been done on the idea of trying to communicate to the management teams and the multiple levels of an organization on the concept of the cost to actually delay decisions, the cost of not making the improvements sooner rather than later, and the cost to wait is typically far greater than the cost of failure.
No, there's a lot of studies on that for sure. In terms of those loops. One thing you can do for your whole organization, for those of you who are running businesses, to kind of speed this up and to help people think about it is if you have that one-page plan, so everybody's focused on going east today. And east is like, in my mind, 070 to 110 on the compass. 090 is perfect east.
Okay.
Then you're fine. You can let people have some degrees of freedom. If they're going 270, you need to turn them around. Yeah. But once you have that, one of the tools from very early on we used, certainly at the airline, but I've used kind of my whole career. It started out with voicemail, essentially, where you'd set up a 1-800 number, and every Friday afternoon you'd leave a voicemail message with, here's kind of what our plan is again, here's what we did last week, here's what we're going to do this week, here's what I want you to know. And especially for organizations, leasing would be a great example. Airlines with people spread out were a great example. Or BurgerKing, where the franchisees were all over the place, all over the country, all over the world. People would dial into that and they'd get an update once a week in terms of, here's where we are, here's the progress, here's kind of what we're focused on. And it really helped keep people informed as to where we were on the plan, right? And that personal communication, at the time, have dial into voicemail. Now you could leave them a video, right? I mean, there's a lot of newer technology now you can use to do it, but being able to personally hear your voice and you being able to personally take their feedback and actually act on it and reflect on it and push it back out really does speed that improvement time and brings everybody along at the same time.
Yes. So I can tell you, one of the interesting things is the foundation that I'm chairman of right now. We hired, I think, a friend of yours, Waters Davis.
Oh yeah, Waters is great. Waters was my best friend at Harvard Business School.
Yeah, I thought I'd heard that.
Yeah,
I heard that. So we brought him in right after his tenure being president of Reliant Energy. I think he had 10,000 employees, whatever it was there. And it was nice bringing him in because as a board member, we didn't have to worry about anything. You just turn over the keys and you just let them go.
Yeah.
And And so one of the things that he stresses is it's really important in a larger organization that you as the chief executive, that you notice that there's a lot more places where you get to the word no before you get to the word go.
Yeah.
That there's not enough permission. There's a lot of controls. There's a lot of negativity, a risk aversion in larger organizations. There's not a lot of places where they say, go make a run at it. Go be aggressive on this. And so that was one of the things that I learned from Waters. And so as we've looked at and had I guess structures that we try to set up over time, we try to implement these. And I think this is maybe a Harvard Business School item. This responsibility matrix, this RACI matrix, where you set up the responsibilities, accountabilities, and so forth in these organizations. Did you use a formalized structure, or do you use formalized structures to talk about responsibilities and accountabilities, or do you?
No, we probably didn't. We probably weren't as formalized as we needed to be. We would just do a lot of communication, kind of what we wanted to have, and then we set up both at Continental and BurgerKing. We set up 1-800 numbers where if any employee saw anything wrong on the system or anything they thought needed to be addressed, they could actually call in. And we would get back to them within 24 hours with, we're going to fix it, or, we're not, and here's why, or, we need to study it a little longer, and here's when we'll get back to you.
Yes.
So, and then every morning, particularly at the airline, we would have a meeting with representatives, leaders from the flight attendants, the pilots, the mechanics, the gate agents, the entire ops team, and we'd go through and we'd address those. And so, do that 2 or 3 years, and pretty soon you're in pretty good shape. So we, in a sense, it's had that feedback operation. Sure. And then the Continental, when we got there, BurgerKing was the same. We had so many rules. Do this, do that. Every time something went wrong, somebody would write another rule. And pretty soon the rule book gets to be this thick.
Yeah.
And so, we basically got a trash can, some diesel, and lit it on fire. And basically just sat down and with folks, developed 2 or 3 pages of general guidelines, right? And then your leasing example was a good one, because you can put some technology inside of decisions that are being made. So I'll give you one that everybody would think about at the airport. A gate agent has a problem. A flight's been delayed, somebody's bags were lost, something happened. They should have a set of tools where they can actually delight the customer, right? And that might be an upgrade. It might be, we'll deliver your bags to your home by this time, whatever that is, right? They ought to be able to make that decision on the spot. Well, if you have technology in there and you see that the same gate agent upgraded 20 people with the same last name, and it happened to be their same last name, they upgraded their whole family, right? So then you can go back and you can say, hey, we're not doing that. We're not, we're not here to upgrade your whole family. But what we're here to do is delight the customer. So you don't need to set so many rules in place. You can actually use technology to kind of help you allow people the freedom to make a decision. And then if you see patterns, or somebody makes a mistake, you can go back and address it. But you give them the freedom to make it, first of all. Sure. We used to say, at the airline for sure, that it's a captain's airline. So if folks are there and you want to, your decision to take off, right? You make the decision. And the system control people, there's kind of a Star Wars-like place that controls the entire network at airlines. Basically whoever's running that, that shift, that's their shift, right? They make the decisions. So are they going to make all right decisions in terms of what flight to cancel, what flight not, when to slow down things into New York because there's weather coming? Or probably not perfect, right? Yeah. But, you can't make all those decisions at the top. You have to let people make those decisions.
That's right. And I think I saw a lot of pictures of you actually in Home Depot stores over the years. I mean, you spend a lot of time with frontline workers.
We do, yeah. No, we spend a lot of time with our associates. We really love our orange-blooded associates. And Bernie Marcus and Kenny Langone and Arthur Blank were the founders of Home Depot. And they developed 2 pieces of strategy which were brilliant, right? 2 sheets of paper. One was an inverted pyramid, and it starts with customers at the top, it's inverted. So, and then it has the associates, right? The orange-blooded associates, and then the store management, and then the store support center, right? Which is our headquarters, and then the CEO, right? The board doesn't even rate on this thing. But that's how the companies run, right? So it really is to empower the associates to make the right decision. And there are famous stories this happening, of associates early in the day taking tires that people returned at Home Depot. Home Depot doesn't even sell tires, right? And giving them a credit. So, so that's very rewarded. And then we have a value wheel with the culture of the company on this value wheel. And that's the other thing. And quite frankly, we've added a third one, which is a stool that Frank Blake and Craig Manier came up with, which is an interconnected retail. So you could run the whole company off those 3 sheets of paper.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it's all values, right?
Yeah.
It's all hanging into your values, and it's a complicated, big business. And Meyer, the management team there, is doing a great job. But it really comes back to those core values.
That's right. That's right. I think of someone like a Horst Schulze who started kind of the modern day Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah, exactly. Same. Yeah, same.
I mean, empowering the frontline
Sam Walton
workers.
at Walmart.
Exactly.
Right. Same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Horst Schulze, I mean, I think even the housekeepers in those Ritz-Carltons have the authority to make anything right. They own all the problems they hear, whether it's their problem or not.
Yeah.
And I think he gives them a $2,000 per person budget to handle each complaint if they need to.
Yeah.
And so
it's brilliant.
So it is, and no one, maybe someone abuses it somewhere along the line, but for the most part, it's really worked. And we actually have brought in about every 3 years, we'll do a year of concentration on the Ritz-Carlton customer service metrics about how to ramp up, how to onboard a new project, that sort of thing. A lot of similarities, and I think they do things right. So let's get back to the balance sheet item. Obviously, right now we're at a time of low interest rates. They're artificially low. I think the Treasury and the Fed are clearly working together towards impacting that for obvious reasons. What is the decision whether or not to take on debt for a business in order to reinforce their balance sheet, especially in a time like this, whenever we have low interest rates and a little bit of uncertainty in the future? Yeah,
no, I think it really does depend business to business. And I'll talk about business and I'll talk about life, because I think that those two are pretty different.
Yes.
The business side, so you got to decide what's important to you and what you really, what you want to do. You don't want to get out of balance. So you want to make sure your maturities are long enough out there, you have plenty of cash, and all of that. And certainly some businesses can handle a decent amount of debt. But I remember this time last year, Craig Manier, who's the CEO of Home Depot, and the CFO and I were talking, and Richard McPhail's the CFO. And we decided the most important thing to the company, and there wasn't even a question, back to that inverted pyramid, was we wanted to make sure if we were shut down for 60 days by the U.S. government, we could pay our employees, right, our associates.
Yes.
And it was the single most important thing. So we said, well, how much would it take to pay our associates for 60 days if we're totally shut down? We'll have a little bit coming in off of .com and, all that. So we did the math, and the math was $11 billion. It would take $11 billion. We didn't end up getting shut down, but we were essential. But at $11 billion. So we had $3 billion on the balance sheet. We had a $5 billion commercial paper program, so that's an 8. We went to J.P. Morgan. We got a line of credit to back up that commercial paper program. So we got a $5 billion line of credit. But the markets were closed. The bond markets were completely closed in March of last year. And we needed $3 billion more, right? So in looking at Craig and Richard, I said, if Home Depot can't open the bond market, there's nobody that can open the bond market.
Right.
So let's go try. And they went out, and credit to them, within 2 hours for that $3 billion, we had like $29 billion worth of demand. So at like under 3%, right? Everybody wanted Home Depot paper. So we actually borrowed 5. So we got to 13 to give ourselves a little bit of a cushion. We never really needed to use that, so we were able to use it to do an acquisition we wanted to do later, and we had a little bit of negative carry on the cash on the balance sheet for a little bit. But the point really was we wanted to protect, the whole reason we did that was to live to the culture, to protect the associates from something really bad happening to them and their family, and there's 500,000 of them roughly, so it's a lot, so and a big piece of the economy. But if you think like that, and that's why you're pulling your debt down, and it's to keep with your values and to manage your business. That's an extreme example. Depot's a very successful company, but that's a pretty good use of debt. So I think you can use it, where it makes sense, and we do in our business all the time. I think personally, once you write your one-page go-forward plan, so you take out your sheet of paper and you write faith, family, friends, fitness, finance, and you figure out what that is. You want your personal balance sheet to be set up so that nothing stops you from executing that plan that God has put in front of you in your life, right? So you always want to ask the question, is this decision or is this incremental amount of debt going to cause me to be further or closer to my maker, to be closer to or further away from my family, to allow me to invest and build in my friendships, to allow me to maintain my health, to exercise, to take care of myself. And you really want your personal balance sheet to match, alongside of your plan to make sure that you actually own your life. The bank doesn't own your life. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And so that's a different answer. I've got some general rules of thumb for people in terms of how much to spend on housing and how much kind of debt to take on. But I think in your personal life, the less debt you can actually manage to, the better off you are, right? Because it gives you freedom. You get, in fact, on the where Build a Fortress balance sheet is kind of the business step I use for personal life. I use this step for finance. It's called choose freedom, right? Because you want to be able to do to fulfill God's calling in your life without a bank having a call on you.
That's right. That's right. And I think the predominant command in the Christian faith is fear not.
Yeah.
I mean that's the most common command that our Lord gave us. Second, maybe to money, depending on how you read certain verses.
Yeah.
And so if we have a fear, and the fear is intrinsically built into this debtor-borrower type of relationship with the lender, it really hinders us.
It does hinder us. And it also hinders another thing that's important. So in business, you think money in, not money out.
That's right.
In life, it's exactly the opposite. You think money out, not money in. Because generosity is the only cure for materialism. And you can look at the 13 major worldviews, Christianity, atheism, Enlightenment movement with Immanuel Kant, Judaism, the Muslim faith. The only thing they all agree on is that we need to give alms to the poor, that we need to help those out that are less fortunate. Mm-hmm. Well, if you owe a bunch of money to the bank and your own personal cash flow situation isn't balancing because you're outspending your income, right? You're living above your means. Your chance of really being truly generous and getting the blessing from being truly generous, goes way down, right? Yeah. So that's just another reason why you want to keep your personal balance sheet in pretty good shape.
And you cite the great C.S. Lewis quote from Mere Christianity: "The only safe bet is to give away more than you can afford."
Yeah,
I think he stole that from Wesley as well.
Yeah, everybody, it's funny because I was given this talk, this commencement address at my son's school when he graduated, which is Asbury University, my youngest son, and which is a Methodist theological school, but he went to the undergrad there, and so I was going to be talking not only to the undergrads but to all these theologians, and so I wrote this talk up on faith at work, and I sent it to Tim Keller, and he said, "I think you stole this, Greg, from my book Every Good Endeavor," which I honestly didn't, but I probably stole some of the concepts. I probably got some of the concepts from there, but I told him back. I said, "Tim, I think you stole everything you got from C.S. Lewis, who took it from King Solomon, who said there's nothing new under the sun." So the reality is, I think some of these time-honored, principles and are really. I think we all live on the shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm going to put the disclaimer into this: is if we say anything that sounds smart, we stole it from somewhere. We just can't remember who we stole it from.
Yeah, I can't remember where. I tell everybody I'll give you attribution the first time, and after that I'm just going to take it. So.
That's right. That's right. So you introduced the topic of books. What sort of books do you enjoy reading? Because you're an avid reader.
Yeah, I read a fair amount. I like all kinds of books. I used to read probably until I was like 45. I'd read a lot of I'd read a lot of the John Grisham, Greg Iles kind of things to relax. I don't really do that anymore. So part of that epiphany of I probably ought to watch what I read because you can only read so much.
That's right.
And I really do personally enjoy reading theology. So I read a lot of theology and books like that. I love history. I love historical biographies as well. So I like reading those.
So I do. I've been doing 50 books a year for, I think it's my 8th year doing
that's
that.
Great. Yeah.
And same sort of thing. I tend to read more theology. If I'm looking at business books or theology, I'm gonna just go ahead and
read the theology.
read theology.
It takes you to a different place, and we quite honestly we get a lot of business interaction. So it's probably a more important place to be.
That's right. And I'll still know the line from Lewis. He says that you can never understand the lower medium without understanding the higher first. And having the perspective is right. And so understanding the higher, the theological endeavors help us better understand business and dealing with people.
No, it's important. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what sorts of authors and theology books do you like?
Well, I love reading Tozer. J.I. Packer, is another, excellent to read. I think I've probably read almost everything Tim Keller has written. He's a good friend. It's really the C.S. Lewis of our time, just an amazing human being. So on the theology side, I like those. I really enjoyed, David Brooks wrote a book called The Road to Character, he's New York Times columnist, and I thought David did a great job with that book. I enjoyed that book. So
he mentions the virtues in there, the two different types of virtues.
He talks about, my favorite kind of quote I use a lot from that book is, there are resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are how somebody introduces you when you're giving a speech or, doing a podcast or whatever it might be. Sort of the litany of stuff you've done in your life. And, in the very end, those are really not so important, right? It makes you feel good when you hear them, but, not so important. But the eulogy virtues are what really, matter. Is what do you want people to say at your funeral?
Yes.
Right? Where do you want to have invested, throughout your life? And that's the point of writing the one-page personal plan. It's really to get, in poker there are red chips, white chips, and blue chips. The white chips are $1, the red chips are 10, and the blue chips are 25. And I sort of think of it like that. You really want to get those blue chip things that if you don't focus on them, time is just going to pass.
Yes.
It might be spending a weekend with each of your children every year. It might be making sure you spend time with your parents, doing something meaningful. It might be making sure you spend plenty of time mentoring other people, or after you read a good book, sending it out to those that you think might get something really meaningful out of it. It's those kinds of things. My wife and I, and with Britt and Julia Harris, who are dear friends, have been doing a marriage summit for the last 13 years for younger, couples. Things like that you're really trying to build longer-term value that will extend past, your time on Earth, and to pass it on. Like folks have passed it to us.
Yeah.
Right. I was fortunate really to have some amazing mentors in my life, whether my Uncle Lyle, or I got to spend a lot of time with 41, George H.W. Bush, and with Senator Lloyd Bentsen here, in Houston. And he was on the Continental Airlines board. And
really?
Yeah, he actually, when he left government, he actually came on the Continental Airlines board, and he called me and he said, "Greg, I'd like to meet with you once every 3 weeks." And he said, "I want to do a couple international trips with you." So I said, "Guy, that sounds fantastic." So we would meet, and then we went to Buenos Aires together. I don't know, 2 or 3 months into this, and we went to see Menem, the president there, and we got there, and I was, Continental was driving flights into these places, so it made some sense. And we had this honor guard, with the soldiers with the swords and the band and all this. So we're in the car, and he said, "Greg, this meeting is for you with the president to talk about air service. So why don't you, go first?" I said, "With all due respect, Senator, none of these guys would be here with the fancy swords and the band if it wasn't for you. So you go first." He said, "Now let's walk in together." So we did, but I asked him like 6 months into this. I said, "Senator, it's been an incredible honor to spend this time with you. And I really appreciated it. But I said, I have to ask you a question." He said, "What's that, Greg?" I said, "Well, why did you agree or think, reach out to me to kind of help mentor me?" And I don't know how many of you remember Senator Bentsen, right? But he had the most famous debate line in the history of political debates.
Epic against
line.
Quayle, yes.
Against Dan. He was debating Dan Quayle, who was a young senator, was President Bush 41's running mate. He was running with Mike Dukakis.
That's right.
And they were having this debate, and Dan Quayle was comparing himself to JFK because of age and temperament, and so
Huge mistake. Huge mistake.
Huge mistake. And Senator Bentsen basically ended the debate by looking at him and saying, Senator, he said, I knew JFK. He said, Senator, JFK was a friend of mine, and he said, Senator, you're no JFK.
I have as much experience in the Congress as Jack Kennedy did when he sought the presidency. I will be prepared to deal with the people in the Bush administration if that unfortunate event would ever occur.
Senator Bentsen?
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
And that was basically game, set, match, right? So with that same tone and kind of smirk, he actually looked at me and said, Greg, the reason I decided to mentor you is because you need it.
Wow.
Which was, it was classic Senator Bentsen. Wow. But he was just an amazing man.
He was.
So, but I was fortunate to have those kinds of guys as mentors. So if you think about mentoring and helping other people, I think we all need a Paul and a Timothy, someone who mentors us and someone who we mentor.
That's right.
So we try to pass it. We all need to pass it along, right?
Jim Collins' new book, I think it's BE 2.0, talks about it as who luck. I think some of the people would refer to it. But these people, these chance random encounters that you have where you meet these people. Kyle Van was one of the people for me.
Yeah, Kyle's a perfect example.
We've got just 2 or 3 people in everyone's life that maybe they really made a huge change in the trajectory. So Lloyd Bentsen III, who's still living, is a real close friend. We have lunch every once in a while.
Amazing
pre-COVID.
family.
So we're sitting having lunch probably 3 or 4 years ago, just he and I, and in walks Neil Bush. Now, for the people who aren't familiar with it, so it was George H.W. Bush and Dan Quayle versus Dukakis and Senator Bentsen,
Lloyd Bentsen,
his dad. His dad. Lloyd III stands up, I stand up, and we have this interchange with Neil Bush. So these are the sons of probably 2 of the big icons of both the liberal and the conservative movements in the 1980s. And I just sit there, and Greg, I'm just in awe of this conversation. I'm thinking this is kind of a quasi-historic moment right here, and these 2 guys compare notes. And so we sit back down, and I just never realized how involved the partnership between Lloyd III and Lloyd Jr., which is the senator, really was, and how close that father-son bond were.
Yeah, no, he was close to his sons for sure. I respect his sons immensely. The interesting thing about, you kind of say conservative and liberal, the interesting thing about those 2 guys and their generation is they were all the greatest generation, right? They came out of World War II, and they knew what it was like to fight for the U.S., and actually the country was way more important than the political position. And Senator Bentsen was a very conservative, what they used to call in the day, blue dog Democrat, right? And President Bush was a very compassionate, what I'd call Republican, right? Yeah. So, they actually politically, even though they competed against each other, not only in that race, but in another race early in their career, they were actually very philosophically close, and they were quite good friends.
Really?
So really? Yeah, it was a different day, as they say. And as I think about politics, I long for that. I had the opportunity to know them both pretty closely, and I kind of long for their true sense of what America is and the teamwork that's needed in the country. So.
That's right. And I don't want to get into a tangent with politics, but it seems like both parties are just going to the extremes.
Yeah,
and there's no common ground. Back then, obviously, the blue dog Democrat would be sort of the moderate Republican these days.
It would be, yeah, absolutely, yeah, no, for sure, yeah, and I think we've actually nailed down where the extremes are. Now we need to sort of see if we can figure out something in between.
That's right. That's exactly right. So in the context of trying to put together this executive team, that they're finding the right people. Jim Collins' line again, which is epic, which is we've got to get the right people on the bus, and we've got to give them the right seats there. Yeah. it seems like that may be most of your job if you're coming in from a private equity standpoint, just getting the right people there and letting them run the asylum.
Yeah, no question. In private equity, what you're trying to do is take the company and write that plan with management, right?
Yeah.
Preferably as you're kind of looking at buying the business, so you write it together, and then you just want to make sure you have the right folks to execute it. And if those right folks are in place, fantastic. Life is so much better.
Yes.
But if not, you need to sort of make that happen, right? And get that team in place. And then because you're owning 10, 12 businesses at a time or something, you really want to get yourself in a situation where they do run they are running the company. You're not running the company.
That's right. That's right. So it seems like the job of the CEO, I guess the private equity CEO is really to monitor the CEOs, to have a team on staff that can support them, probably focus more on opportunities rather than problem solving.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of both. I
Okay.
mean, there's always in every business some problem solving as well. But what we do in our firm, but maybe a little different. So half of our partners are owners, like myself, are traditional operators, right? We've actually run businesses. We've been CEOs for private equity, done that, sit on boards like HomeDepot and others. And half of us are traditional private equity guys, have been in their private equity their entire career. So on every deal we do, we have one of each at least. So we have that balance. And I think that's worked out really well, because if you've sat in the seat of the CEO and you know what their problems are and what their issues are, you can actually you can provide a different kind of counsel to them than what they would get just from a financial person. And likewise, the partners that have been financial people in their careers, they have a lot to add in deal structuring and capital markets and other areas. But that model has worked pretty well for us, right?
So in 2006, J.P. Morgan Chase decided they want to get out of the private equity business, if memory serves, and so they spun out CCMP Capital, I guess the future CCMP Capital, and you joined a couple of years later.
Yeah. So the way that worked, I talked to Jamie at the time. They had just done the merger of Bank One and J.P. Morgan.
Okay.
And I think they half did that merger just to get Jamie, right? Which has been precedent. He's probably one of the better CEOs in the world today, and has been for a long time. And he ended up with two private equity firms. So he ended up with J.P. Morgan Partners and One Equity Partners. One Equity was run by a fantastic guy by the name of Dick Cash, and it was quite a lot smaller than J.P. Morgan Partners. J.P. Morgan was kind of the merchant banking operation of the bank. And so Jamie decided to spin out J.P. Morgan Partners independently, and that became CCMP, so it's Chase Chemical Manufacturers or Morgan Partners. And that happened in 2006. And I had been talking to Jamie and to the team, the CCMP team, for a while, kind of through that process, and officially joined them in 2008 to change the business model a little bit to this two heads are better than one model, right? With an operator, and so I've been executive chairman there for since that time.
So were you already in private equity in that before you got into that role?
No, I was actually still running companies. So I had run, I was still running. I think at the time they spun out, I was still running BurgerKing. So I'd just been talking to them for a while. I had my own family office, which I called, it's been around a long time, called Turnworks. So I was doing some stuff in there, but no, that was my kind of first foray to go into the dark side and leaving kind of running companies and going to private equity.
Yeah. So in the private equity business, one of the big strategies, obviously you've got strategies around different verticals, obviously around different industries, different plays, turnaround deals, majority stakes. You guys obviously in the turnaround business, you have to focus on majority stakes. You got to get control of the stakes to be able to turn some of these businesses around.
In fact, we're almost entirely, with very few exceptions, controlling stake oriented, in our business. And we actually have over time really focused the business. I found the fastest way to make money is stop doing things that lose it, right? And that comes back to the great Continental example of. I looked at the schedule, and when I got there, and 18% of the flying was cash flow negative. It wasn't covering the cost of the food, the fuel, the crew, the aircraft rent. And I said, well, why do we go Greensboro to Greenville 8 times a day when both customers are on the first flight? And somebody would say it's strategic, and I'd say, well, when did it ever make money? And they'd say it never did. I'd say, how strategic could that possibly be, right?
Yeah,
we've all had those conversations. So the same thing's true in private equity. When you're part of a big bank and coming out of a big bank like they they had a little bit of everything. So they had some real estate in Latin America, they had venture in California, they had an Asia thing, they, you know, a lot all over Europe. But if you really did the study of where do you make money, right? About 120% of the profits came out of middle market private equity, consumer, industrial, and retail, right?
Yes.
So, or consumer, industrial, and healthcare. So we focused just on North America, consumer, industrial, and healthcare. And over time, we just got really tight and really focused.
Are you defining middle market as like $5 to $50 million in EBITDA, or how do you?
Yeah,
how do you
50
define
would
that?
be pretty small for kind of what we do.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd say it depends on the company, but that would be at the very small end.
Okay.
You know, that up to, you know, I don't know, probably the biggest we've owned is $1 billion.
Okay.
Wow. But you know, more of them would be in the sort of, you know, 150 to 250 range, and then, you know, like a couple of the businesses we've sold lately, and you know, when we bought them, you know, one of them was 130, and by the time we sold it, it was 310, right? So we've grown it essentially over 4 or 5 years, and the goal is to grow businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the goal. It's to grow businesses, create jobs.
We got into a one-on-one bake-off with a Zillow-backed private equity, or a Zillow-backed subsidiary last month, and the numbers just got crazy.
Yeah.
Just got crazy. And I'm realizing the people that have access to the capital markets, especially if they're not direct capital market related, they're going through a parent company as a subsidiary. They just really have no concept of what good business is, and they're just trying to acquire assets at will. And you guys don't make acquisitions like that. You're more kind of medical industrial.
Yeah, we're more you know, we will pay up for good businesses, but we'll not. You know, we're not, you know, buy on a multiple of revenue people, right? So,
Yes.
You know, we're real earnings, real cash flow.
Yeah.
I wish, quite honestly, we were good at investing in technology. We are great at doing digital transformation of industrial companies or consumer companies or healthcare companies that are, you know, real companies.
Sure.
But, you know, I wouldn't even have a clue how to bet on the next Facebook or the next, you know, Amazon or Google or something. No. I wish I had that skill set. I'd be a lot wealthier if I did, and, you know, we could give more money away. But so we try and stick to what we're good at, you know, which are North America, consumer, industrial, and healthcar businesses.
Yeah, I think the old version of Benjamin Graham's Intelligent Investor that I have access to, I think their last data set on sectors was from like 1926 to 1976, I think, and he said that during a time of high inflation, what I think we're starting to get into clearly,
towards, it looks like,
you want to get out of everything except for industrials.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe some power companies, things like that have some protection margin through regulatory requirements, but it seems like tech may be a good place to escape from right now. I don't know.
I don't know. It's every time I think that, you know, it goes up some more. So I don't know. We don't invest there, but you know, I'm in awe of the people that have gotten that right, because they've obviously been able to see around the corner a little bit.
That's right. So a few years ago, I had this interesting dinner. I had dinner with a young guy. He was in his 20s. We're both in our 20s, and there was a group that brought the 300 top CEOs from around the country to a 1 week all expenses paid thing in South Beach, Miami. South Beach. Put us with the Ritz-Carlton. We thought we were fancy stuff. And I had dinner one night with this guy in his 20s. He said, "Yeah, I sold my company, my tech company, to AOL, and they just ran into the ground for 18 months. So I bought it back, and I've got $6 million left." And he said, "Rick, I'm just going to put this $6 million into a bond, and like, you know, that'll be my retirement when I get to be 60 or 70 or whatever it would be." He said, "I will never ever spend that $6 million." So we stayed in touch a little bit, and about probably 3 years later, I turn on the news. No, I see an article that this person was now the second wealthiest person in Canada because he took that $6 million and founded a company that became known as Uber.
Oh, wow.
And
fantastic.
And so I've been following at a distance where he'd buy I think he bought a Malibu mansion for like $120 million or something just insane like that, because there was that one more big
to
gamble.
do, yeah.
And you know, Benjamin Graham, for instance, he would say that would be an idiotic thing to do to put, you know, high risk, put your last egg in and put in a high risk basket.
At least if you're going to do it while you're young.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. You got time. You got
Got
time.
time.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you mitigate risk, or do you even bother mitigating risk from an investment strategy from the private equity level?
Well, I think there's a lot of risk mitigation you can do. Currency counterparty, you go through those. In '08, everybody said, mitigating risk really became understanding what banks you were actually working with.
Yes.
Right. So you need to keep your eye on those kinds of things, and things that you don't think would matter right now, like that,
Yeah.
kind of matter sometimes, right?
That's right.
So you got to pay attention to it. But in terms of hedging and stuff like that, we buy really good businesses that we think we can grow. And then, sometimes we'll take them public. We have 3 businesses that are public right now. And so we have some market risk, right, in the stock. We won't hedge that out, but what we'll do is once we take it public, we'll look to liquidate it reasonably quickly, to sell it out. So we'll mitigate risk that way. And then, personally, I think as you're looking at your own portfolio, you really just want to make sure you got a good balance of cash and equities, and that you're just balanced, right?
Sure.
It's probably just the same way you should eat your lunch as well. Make sure you eat a balanced lunch.
That's right.
Or live your life, right? I think it's all good things kind of come with balance. But we're constantly looking at our debt maturities at the end interest rates. You can borrow so inexpensively now, but
That's
the
right.
one thing you can't do is you have to have a line of credit, and you have to have your debt that actually matures long enough into the future that you have you can execute your plan. I like saying private equity is like a long dated option, right? You have an option on a company for a very long period of time to make it better. You just don't want anybody shortening the date.
That's right.
Right, and that's where you get into kind of risk mitigation.
And you guys don't do any shorts. You're not a full hedging firm.
We're not at all. We don't trade publicly, so it's everything we buy is private. We might take it public,
Yeah.
and then we have shares to sell out because the company's become successful in public. But
But you're not buying tips or inflation adjustment
No.
securities to offset anything. Okay.
no,
Okay.
no.
We like to use. I'm old school investing
Yeah.
strategy, and I look for high regulatory businesses.
Yeah.
So, for instance, we have an elevator business.
Yeah.
We've got obviously a brokerage business.
Yeah, no, there's barriers to entry around those, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And so, do you see these barriers to entry businesses as worth higher multiples over time, especially when you look at making the acquisitions initially and what you're going to dispose it for?
Well, if you go back, and some of you kind of will recognize Porter's 5 forces, right? You've seen that paradigm before. If you look at businesses through that prism, you can actually understand what those barriers are. So they might be regulatory, like an elevator company or a brokerage firm. It could be regulatory. There could just be market barriers because of technology or because of patents,
Yes.
or because of the competitive dynamics. So this business that we own now, Hayward, in the pool equipment business, there are 3 global suppliers of pool equipment, right? So it functions really, really nicely as an industry.
Yes.
There's a good, healthy, competition, but it functions very, very well. So you can actually look at businesses and say, what are the barriers to entry, the barriers to exit, and competitively, how is that going to function? Certainly regulatory barriers are one. There are other barriers, right, in technology or in market share or capital availability or manufacturing capability. But those businesses that do have those barriers around them, right, where people can't enter, quite as quickly. Real estate's an interesting one because if somebody can get a permit, say in Houston, Texas, where we are, there's not much zoning.
That's right.
You can pretty much build. So you probably ought to pay attention to what permits are being filed before you put up another big office building, right? What's kind of going to come on the market, right? So I'd say the barriers there aren't all that high, right? So you need to understand it a little bit differently. But and there are a lot of businesses like that. The oil and gas business is the perfect example of that, right? What you're producing is a pure commodity, right? There's no differentiation to speak of. So you better make sure your cost structure's in line. You've got access to the best transportation and all that kind of stuff. Where in something that has a barrier, like you're talking about, like the elevator business, you have a few more degrees of freedom.
Yeah.
Because the chance of getting disintermediated there are just a lot lower.
That's right. That's right. My favorite business, we have a federal government business, and we manage very, very complex real estate related projects for them that also require a software component. So we have able to capture the data, control the data, and be able to have a little bit of a captured audience, at least over a 5-year, trying to get these five-year renewals over time. And that's been my favorite business because the government is so difficult to work with.
Yeah.
They are so impossible to work with. And they don't realize that whenever they open up competition, they're going to get better pricing, they get more competition, we're going to get better quality over time. And that's the ironic thing. Like, these guys have never read any Frederic Bastiat or anything like that. That just free market principles. If you apply them to the federal government, they're going to work.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, it's there's a lot of examples of that. We own a business in Canada that's an integrated facility management business that the project side, they'll go in and retrofit buildings with high LED lighting and high efficiency HVAC and windows and insulation. And then but most of their business is actually managing that remotely, right? So they'll put sensors in. They have, several thousand HVAC technicians in Australia, the US, Canada, and the UK, and they dispatch, to do that. But they cut the electricity usage of the businesses so tremendously, and they win every ESG award, because of that. But that's got a really significant barrier to entry because you've got the, getting skilled labor right now is so hard.
It is.
So if you actually own the skilled labor and you own the software package and the IT that allows you to monitor the sensors, to control, the contracts you get are very long, and the customer retention rate is over 99%.
Yeah.
Because of the value you're providing. So that's another kind of example like you're talking about of just a business that it might not look to have a barrier that's totally regulatory, but it has a practical barrier because the customer service provided that's just fundamentally sound.
Yeah. The big ESPCs like Sylvania, energy service performance contracting companies that did sort of that back in the early 2000s, really cleaned up.
Yeah.
I mean, they did really
They're
well.
good. They're good businesses, and they do well by doing good, right? So they're
Yeah.
actually reducing carbon footprint as well.
So you said on the personal level is the inverse from the business level. Businesses, you think money in, not money out. Personal level, you think money out, not money in. Alluding to a concept, a philosophy of generosity as a mechanism really to solve our natural greed as people.
Yeah. No. It's exactly. No, I think obviously that the Christian philosophy certainly backs that up. There's a lot of verses in Matthew and throughout the Bible. In fact, money's the number one thing talked about in the Bible, and God tells us you can either love me or money, but not both. And it's really what tithing is. It's really fasting from money so it doesn't become a controller. It can be a wonderful servant or a relentless master.
That's right.
So basically, but paying forward and making sure God doesn't need our money, but we need to give it to help others.
Sure.
But you don't even have to, even if you're not Christian, if you're an Enlightenist or an atheist, and you still go through the literature, everybody really does believe that giving alms to the poor and helping those less fortunate is super important for our own mental well-being.
That's right.
As well as obviously to help out, but it's just super important.
Some of my business partners, some of my best friends are Hindus.
Yeah.
And they are very good.
Very
at
generous.
helping with the poor. One of the ideas about generosity is something that Randy Alcorn talks about in one of his books. I don't think it's the book on heaven. I think it's maybe the treasure principle, where he uses Luke 12:34 as an example. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And he says you can direct your heart if you put your treasure there first. That the heart literally follows the treasure.
Yeah. No, I think he's probably absolutely right on that. And we've actually for years and years now, probably over 15 years. We've given away money as a family, so we have our whole family involved in it, and our kids are all responsible for certain philanthropies that we've decided under our family mission to support. And we use Christmas Day for that, Rick. So we have a family meeting on Christmas Day. We do the Christmas story and open a few presents, have some brunch, and then we spend the rest of the day actually going through and allocating what we're going to give away as a family that year. And that's kind of how we spend Christmas Day. And that's actually added a whole new meaning to Christmas to sort of focusing on others versus on on yourself. And our kids, who are now not kids anymore, they're 32, 30, and 28, are really, really good at doing this. So they're responsible for bringing an annual report for the charities we support, and actually for recommending others. The only rule now is that they have to, if they recommend one, they also got to make a recommendation of which one to drop, because there's only so many you can actually support well, and it's time, talent, and treasure. It's not just treasure, so it means you have to be able to spend a little bit of time on it too.
That's right. And that's the big challenge of the Christian life, and that's what makes the Christian life really unique from the rest of religions. Is it's a faith in which demands the whole person. It demands the intellect, it demands the life, it demands the personality, it demands the effort and the work, and it's not just an intellectual
Exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a great group of private equity guys in the Manhattan area, because you spend a lot of time in Manhattan. It sounds like.
Yeah, still not in the last year, but prior to that, yes.
Yeah. So they wrote I think a couple of the guys wrote a book based off their case study with the Robin Hood Foundation.
Yeah.
And so are you familiar with this at all?
I'm not familiar with the book, but I know the Robin Hood Foundation. I know the New York community pretty well.
Okay. So it's really unique, because they were trying to figure out, they've got this mission to help bring people out of poverty, and they're funding grants around things like education, prenatal care, after school programs, even making sure people have food that's necessary. And so they had to try to quantify all this and how to roll it all up to their mission. And so they go through the statistical analysis of how they do that from a giving spectrum, and how they rate each of these individual efforts in here, because they're issuing 100, 200, 300 grants a year, and how do you get all that to roll up and deploy capital in an efficient, measurable format. And I really like the ingenuity that business guys like you and they take to the nonprofit space, because it seems like a lot of the sharpest business guys are focused on business.
Yeah.
And they don't really use their talent to serve nonprofits.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that. So in the things we support, we try and help out as well, and sort of making sure there's really sound business principles, and even inventing some things that they can do, or giving them some ideas of some programming. Because ultimately you want the programming to be self-sustaining, right?
That's right.
If you're just donating, and there's not something, that's why, my Uncle Lyle had this basically giving philosophy of creating jobs was kind of behind everything he did. He thought you could speak into somebody's life if they had a job and their family was taken care of. So we've kind of adopted that too. So almost everything, all of our giving is focused on creating jobs, whether it be in Honduras or wherever we're doing that kind of work. And that actually enables itself for you to set up a mechanism where you say, if we're going to do something, ultimately at the back end of it, it has to be self-sustaining.
That's right.
Right? Because if it's not, it'll just go away. Right? Once the donation stops, you're done.
Exactly.
Essentially. And so we're always trying to think about, how do we develop models that we can seed the funding and, start the process, but, by, second generation of it, it's got a self-sustaining model.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Yeah.
So I was in Honduras with Kyle.
Oh, did you go down there?
A few years ago with him. He was telling me a little about a project that you guys, I think you guys had worked on, maybe a farm to market type of a produce.
We have two really pretty big projects going on there. We've been down there. We've done this with the Nath family, Bill Nath and Cody, and folks you mentioned before, where the first one in the origin was a project called Thrive, where you would take communities that didn't have any water at all, were walking, miles to get dirty water, and you'd work with them to drive water into their community. They would build the cistern. You'd work with the engineers in Honduras to pull the water over mountains or from streams or wherever you needed to fill the cisterns, and then with PVC piping just laid out over the floor of the forest, you'd actually take it to their individual homes and to fields. Off of that, then we set up communal farming. So the whole community would come, and instead of making subsistence farming around their house with a little bit of corn and coffee, and but really just for their consumption, they were living on about $1 a day. Okay, So basically, you would start doing peppers and tomatoes and things like that are much higher value added. And then Walmart was kind enough to come in, and we hooked up with Walmart and some others to pull that produce out of there. And that actually took the family up to about $16 a day.
Wow.
So instead of not being able to go to school, walking everywhere, they have these little motorcycles, and they basically, their life improves quite a bit. And life expectancy expands, and they can feed their families. And they have some degree of continuation of being able to do that, because when you're living on $1 a day, if like there's a drought or there's a flood, you're so close to not existing that you don't have any margin, say. And then with some of them, and Cody really played a big role in this, we actually were able to drive them into coffee production and set up this coffee co-op, which is called Cafe 504, which is the area code, the
World
country
Vision,
code
I think.
for
That's World
Honduras.
Vision's
It's
coffee
World
company?
Vision. This is all
Yeah,
World Vision.
yeah.
And then actually send that coffee to Europe and to the U.S., gourmet-rated coffee. So those families are up to like $50 a day.
Wow.
Right, so you can see the progression, right? And that's World Vision. So that's called Thrive, loosely. And then the other one, I was really perplexed as we were down there that we were doing this and able to do this in the rural areas, but in the urban areas, and it actually helps with immigration too, because if they have great jobs down there and can take care of their families, they're not looking to come to the U.S.
That's right.
That's right. And USAID is starting to get behind this now, which is just for the first time, which is great, because this will help solve that problem. And then in the cities, though, there wasn't anything there, so we developed a program that we just conceptualized called RISE. And in that one, we didn't want folks to get trained to get a certificate, but the unemployment of youth is about 75% or something. It's incredibly high. That's why they're all in gangs, and it's a very dangerous place. But we worked with the churches, and we went to the business community and developed job training for youth from, say, 15 to 25. And we started with 1,000, and we're now, I think this year, going to do, between 5,000 and 10,000. But youth that kind of come through this program, we're actually training them in what the businesses want in decision making and that kind of thing. And then they actually graduate, and about 60% of them actually end up going into business jobs that the businesses have ready for them. So the franchisees, the movie theaters, the banks, the retail establishments, the cell phone companies are all hiring these graduates, and they really want to get a hold of them. And so the self-sustaining part is now, we've asked them, what does it take you to train an employee? Because they say, these are our best employees, they've been trained. And they say like $2,800 to train and hire a good employee. So we said, if you give us the $2,800, we can create this self-sustaining loop of training people and sending more and more people out all the time as employees. And so that allowed people to leave the gangs. And the gangs were very supportive of this, because they want their brothers and sisters not to be in the gang. And if they go to church to get trained, they really do respect the churches. So it's been organic, but it's actually really developing into something cool that's now getting exported across the triangle. And ultimately, World Vision serves 100 countries, so can get exported around the world. So, but that's the kind of creativity that if you just see the problem and you say, this might be working in the rural areas, but the urban areas are just, and everybody moves to the city.
That's right.
So you have to have a solution for urban, too.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, that's just one example
yeah.
of kind of create a job kind of stuff.
So one of my friends, when he found out that I was going to be able to have a conversation with you, he said, ask Greg about purpose, and really how you would define the life that is one lived with purpose and ultimate value in the end. How would you measure that? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I got asked by a group of CEOs I was talking to, early in COVID, like if you could define managing in a time of crisis in one sentence, what would that be? And that's kind of hard to do, but I think God placed on me, I said, leadership or leading in a time of crisis is all about absorbing fear and exuding hope.
That's right.
Right? And so I think if we think about purpose in a little bit the same way, what we're here to do, I really think as business people, we're here to create jobs. But if you can absorb some people's fear, right? Because everybody's always fearful of what is that change in my life? What's the next step I have to take? All the way down, if you're in Honduras, it's, am I going to have food to eat tomorrow? It gets very basic, right?
That's
and you can exude some hope of here's a way actually to the other side, right? To improve and succeed and feel the success that comes from, working hard and achieving, then I think you've kind of created purpose. So I don't know if that's a great definition of purpose, but I think if you can help do that with people, if you can help absorb fear and exude hope,
That's right.
there's a lot of purpose in that.
Yeah. So I want to wind down with sort of the merger of two different concepts. I think probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, Kyle stuck me on a list of you hosted dinner. You and Britt hosted dinner every October, November timeframe of 50 or 60 Houston area CEOs.
Yeah.
And you always bring in a great speaker. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, one of the themes there was taking this verse out of Matthew, I think maybe Matthew chapter 11, where it talks about the kingdom of God is being stormed by violent men, and these violent men are taking, and there's some different derivatives based off of what translation you use. Paul puts it a little bit of a different way in 1 Corinthians, I think it's chapter 10, maybe 9, where he says we're all running a race, but there's only one person that's going to win. So you've got to work to be that one person. I mean, you're going to exclude a bunch of other people. You've got to beat people to be first, and that's the challenge, and almost if you believe in authority from Paul, he's closer to God for it than we are. And so we ascribe authority to Paul, and so that's sort of an indirect command there that we've got to be first. First or last, as the famous Ricky Bobby said. So we've got these two different auras of aggression that are pent up in our Christian scriptures there, and you took that theme very, very well and gave a challenge to the CEOs in that room. And as I look and I see the work that you're doing, using your influence to effectuate change in CEOs all over the country, through your books, through the books that you give away, I think every year, and the conversations that you have throughout the year with them. What is your mindset? What is your passion like for these CEOs in trying to effectuate change that's eternal change, not just change within businesses and organizations?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think we all have a calling to a higher purpose, right? And what Paul tells us is to run the race, right? And to make sure at the end of the race, what we're trying to hear is well done, good and faithful servant. That's so right. I don't think that means edging a lot of other people out. I think it means if you can encourage people to run that race with you, it's a lot more fun running in a pack.
Yes, it is.
Than it is running alone, right? So I think I think doing that's important, but I think God has given us, and it's part of work. He's given us each a platform in the world. Mother Teresa had a platform to serve orphans in Calcutta, right? That's not the platform you or I probably have, right?
That's right.
God hasn't called us to that, but He's given us a platform of people and things around us that we can hopefully influence for the better, for His to His glory and for His kingdom, right? So that really is the whole point of that dinner, is encouragement of each other. It's not so much, Britt or I or anybody else just encouraging people, but it's actually the camaraderie that comes from, being able to actually passionately pursue just a better life and a better world for other people together, right? And to have them reach their full potential in God's calling for them, right? So whatever that platform is.
That's right.
There's a famous story, and I've heard it repeated a bunch. I didn't witness it personally, but there was a guy that heard about Mother Teresa's ministry in Calcutta, a business guy, and he was so moved by it, he sold all his possessions and moved over there to help in the orphanage. And he got there, and she wasn't there, but so he just started working, and for, 5 or 6 weeks, he was scrubbing floors and helping out, et cetera, et cetera. And she finally came back from her travels, wherever she was, and she came in the room, and I guess Mother Teresa was like 5 foot tall, but really commanded a lot of presence, right? Just had this aura about her. And so she said, "Son, what are you doing?" And he said, he explained the story a little bit, and she said, "No, son, I know who you are." She said, "Son," she said, and I've heard your story. She said, "Son, I got to be honest with you. You're terrible at this, right?" She said, "Calcutta is what God called me to do, right? This orphanage. Wow. You need to go find your own Calcutta." And I think to some degree, we've all been called by God to our own missional assignment.
That's right.
And I think if we can encourage each other and walk together and enjoy each other's company in doing that, and make sure we're thoughtfully through mentorship passing it on to the next generation, that God hopes we'll do it much better than we have, because we've made a lot of mistakes, I'm sure, along the way.
Yes.
That I think is what we're called to do. So that's kind of what that dinner's all about.
That's right. That's right. So I think about the first verse that you quoted was the verse from Paul, that those who love God will be known by Him. And the last verse that you quoted was the verse from Revelation, where our chief aim in life is to get to the point where we're in judgment, or Christ eventually says to us, "Well done, good and faithful service, welcome into your kingdom." And the Westminster Catechism says that the chief aim of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And I can think of no greater glory that could be bestowed upon us as children of God than to be known by God, as Lewis eloquently states, and that appreciation. We can't come to God except for as a child, and that appreciation that we receive as a child, good boy, good job, good and faithful servant, enter into your Father's rest.
That's about as good as it gets.
That's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets. And that seems to me that being the chief aim of our lives, no matter what we're doing, we're just going to get out there and get after it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter of executing, and we're all going to make a lot of mistakes, but we're forgiven.
Yes, great. Well, we're happy to have you as a Kansas boy here in Texas.
Yeah, thanks.
And Greg, I appreciate your time coming in, and thanks for your leadership and your influence for the kingdom.
Thanks, Rick. It was fun.
Great.
Thank you.